Well, let me thank the organizers for the opportunity to come to this meeting in honor of Alex's the 80th year of his birth. I think from what we've heard so far through all the talks that, you know, Alex has clearly been a wonderful colleague to many of us, an extraordinary physicist in many, many ways, and a friend to many of us in the room as well. I didn't, I also say I hope that the next 20 years or longer, whatever it is, you will keep on at the level you have been going for the 80 that you've been here. I didn't have the opportunity to work with Alex, although I almost did. When I got done with my PhD with Steve Berry, he had asked me who I'd like to work with, and I went back and I thought of a few people, and Alex was at the top of my list, but he had just come here at that point, and he didn't have any money, so unfortunately I couldn't come to work with him. And I went to work with Howard Taylor. Maybe temperamentally that might have been better, I don't know, but in any case. So the organizers asked me to talk about ITAMP, and in particular the years, essentially 17 or 18 years after the founding of ITAMP. Dick did a great job in describing what he could about the early part of it. There's lots of unsaid things as well. But you know, as a program, I've been at the NSF like 17 years now, and I always get irritated about all the documentation that you have to go through all the time to you know, when you make an award or a declination. But after going back and having to retrieve from the archives, and you were all getting a little older, our minds are not as good as they were, but having all that information in front of us, Dick came up for a day. It was really good that all of that was down in black and white. So I took over the theoretical program from Dick in around October, I guess, of '89, which is fiscal year '90. I came as a rotator from my home institution, which was then Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory. There's no scientific in the name of Los Alamos anymore. And I stayed there for a year with the intention, and actually I did go back to Los Alamos after that first year. John Cooper came and replaced me from NIST, and I got, in various reasons, I decided to come back to the NSF in '91, and I've been a permanent person there since then. So I've broken this up into sort of 5-year segments. Let me talk about the first 5 years. After ITAMP was founded, which was clearly, as we've heard already, a significant accomplishment, and largely due to Alex's and Kate's hard work, there were still many, many challenges. The award stipulated that that there had to be an appointment at some point of a professorship in the physics department. So there was a recruitment issue, and it was assumed, I guess, that whoever this person was going to become the next director of ITAMP. But in addition, there were other problems. There were space problems at 60 Garden Street. And there was also this distance issue between Garden Street and the Harvard Physics. So this separation issue was also a problem that the institute, the fledgling institute, had to deal with. There was also the fact that there were some members of the AMO community who were skeptical about the need for such an institute. And you can see that by looking at the reviews. And so there was a lot of work that needed to be done at that point to ensure that the institute would be the success that Alex wanted it to be, and that the NSF wanted it to be. Running a visitor program, recruiting talented students and postdocs is a hard enough issue. Coupled with the issue of finding a suitable set of candidates for the new professorship, clearly was a formidable problem. So the recruitment process took a long time, for one reason or another. Whether this was the natural way things happen in universities, the natural inertia, or whether Harvard University at some level was not fully committed to doing this, I don't know, but it did take a while. What I do know, and again because it's documented pretty clearly, that we did make a number of site visits during this early period, and there were many discussions about the need to get this process moving more quickly. And Alex and other people were clearly working very hard to get this process done and to identify a set of candidates. And they were finally. And from that set of candidates, a finalist was chosen, an offer was made. Unfortunately, the candidate rejected the offer. And now I gather, and I'm not sure of this, but I gather according to Harvard rules, the process essentially had to start all over again. Is that correct? Okay. On the other hand, there was one good thing that came out of it all. And that was there were people in the chemistry department, and I think it was Bill Klemper and Dudley Hirschbach primarily. I think so, who became interested in ITAMP, and in some sense, this should have been the case from the outset, since there's a very close connection between theoretical atomic and molecular physics and many parts of theoretical chemistry, and that was even pointed out in the '87 report, which I believe even pointed to the actual health of, quote, in a general sense, AMO science in chemistry, and not so in physics. So it was very good that Bill and Dudley got involved, because when the search was resumed, the search was broadened to include candidates from theoretical chemical physics, and I viewed that as a very positive development. That was my view. And eventually, this led to Harvard making an appointment to Rick Heller, who accepted it. And I think that was 93. And he almost immediately was appointed the new director. In retrospect, it's actually interesting that Rick came full circle, because he started here as a graduate student with Bill Reinhardt, Tom Racino, and some other people I don't remember. But so he was a graduate student here with Bill Reinhardt, as I said, and he comes back 20 years later, about 20 years later, is that right? To be the head of ITAMP and a physics professor. But our paths actually crossed. Aside from the fact that I met Rick and Tom as graduate students, Rick's path and I actually intersected on a few other occasions. I tried to recruit him to Los Alamos as a postdoc and was unsuccessful. But then he actually came back to Los Alamos as a staff member in the same group that I was in, the theoretical chemistry group, for 3 years. Whatever. But in any event, getting back to the major theme here, so now ITAMP had a new director, and at least one of the original criteria of the award was satisfied. Clearly, Alex was working very, very hard to make this happen. There's no doubt about it, and without him it wouldn't have, but I think it's also important to recognize the contributions of Kate Kirby. She was there on a day-to-day basis. She made sure that the visitor program functioned well, that the workshops which were not actually part, I don't know, did you mention that, Dick? Were not actually part of the original proposal did not have anything about workshops internationally, which surprised me, but that's true. And the graduate students and postdocs had what they needed to be productive when they came. And I think her involvement has clearly increased, not decreased over the years. So, and it's unlikely the Institute would have been so successful without her. So that's the end of 5 years, part one. So let's move to the second 5 years. So during the next 5 years, I think ITAMP's kind of moved into what I call full gear. The long and short-term visitor program appeared to be flourishing. Workshops were organized. The postdoctoral program was getting going really well and having some real successes. And the ITAMP played a key role at that point, I think, in actually catalyzing AMO science here in the U.S., but also for foreign visitors who came, who were interested in theoretical atomic and molecular physics. I mean, this was a place where they could really spend very productive time. In addition, ITAMP became the fulcrum for atomic and molecular science in the Cambridge area with things like organizing activities such as the Cambridge Open House, where people from institutions around Boston could get together and discuss their works in an informal and quite pleasant environment. There were regular seminars in AMO physics, and I think those seminars were both here at Harvard and at MIT, if I'm correct. So ITAMP really, to me, had established itself as an important community resource. And I think aside from the issue of the space and maybe the distance between the 60 Guard Street and the physics department, which is always an inertia for people walking, 20 minutes from one place to the other, things were going pretty well. Returning for a moment to Alex, although he was no longer director of ITAMP, he still clearly stayed scientifically involved, mentoring postdocs and graduate students and being the great source he always is for people who want to engage him in discussions. I wanted to say a few words about the NSF perspective. Rick and I were talking a little bit about this, but looking back at the written record, I think it's clear that physics was very supportive of ITAMP. I mean, there were rough periods. I mean, at one point, Rick had to come up to the NSF after one particular site visit, and we had to discuss what was going to happen. But by and large, looking at the record, the reviews were solid in most cases. There were always people who disagree, but and that's not so surprising when ITAMP is 20% of the theoretical atomic physics budget. So it's a big fraction of the budget, and it's always a target because of that for budget cuts in tough times. And in fact, there was one such case, not that we were picking on ITAMP particularly, but there was a case where there was a rescission in the government where we had to actually take 2% out of the NSF budget, but in fact, we actually took 25% out of the ITAMP budget. It's really kind of difficult to cut, $45,000 grants, 2%. This was my decision. I will defend it. I decided to take it out of ITAMP. But in the long run, that money was restored, and I think there wasn't any real big negative impact on ITAMP. So, third 5 years. So, sometime at or near the end of the first 10 years of ITAMP, Rick made a decision that he would step down as director of ITAMP, and I'm just reading into things. I think he felt he wanted more time for other things, wanted to establish a closer connection in the chemistry department. So while he continued some involvement with ITAMP, he began to spend more of his time with his, doing research, supervising students in the two departments, and now he had appointments in both departments and teaching. He always had an artistic side. I remember at Los Alamos, he had an 8x10 view camera and used to take lots of photographs of around New Mexico. And I think this continued to grow, and now he's gotten to this point where he's blending science and art in a very interesting way. And his a lot of his stuff can actually be seen in the halls of the NSF as well as more reputable places. But the problem was now, ITAMP was now faced with the issue of finding a new director. And so a search was initiated. And now I'm going to step back and say, this is my impression, my statement. I don't know the facts. I have impressions that the Harvard Physics Department, for one reason or another, was not at all committed to making a second full professorship appointment in AMO theory. Perhaps they felt that Rick was still there, he was a member of good standing in the department, they had met their obligation, for whatever reasons, but this is just my feeling that that was the case. On the other hand, the Smithsonian, I do believe, appeared very supportive and willing to continue the funding. So the search continued, and a candidate was selected. Unfortunately, as a consequence of some health issues, the candidate opted to decline the offer. And the process continued further. More candidates were identified, but for many reasons which we need not go into, none of these candidates could be persuaded to leave whatever positions they had at that point. And eventually there was a decision made to end the search and not try to find, for the present, and Kate was appointed acting director at that point. And as history shows, she did and is continuing to do an outstanding job. Of course, during this period, ITAMP underwent at least one more review. And while the community was very supportive, still very supportive of the Institute, there were some lingering issues. I think most everyone agreed, both inside the NSF and outside the review, is that the postdoctoral program had been an outstanding success. Now, ITAMP was a wonderful place to be. Clearly, they got very good applications. And so the pool was a very select pool of people to start with. Best graduate students in the country came in. And maybe it's not so surprising in the long run that these talented people got positions that were available afterwards. But I think it's more than that. I think it's also the fact that ITAMP, the environment of ITAMP, which exposed these people to people like Alex and other visitors that came, people in the Harvard Physics, the local faculty in the Harvard Physics Department and the Smithsonian. I think that just made these people grow to be, even above where they would have been had they gone somewhere else. So the training, I think, training in the broad sense, made them the most attractive candidates, and by and large, they really did get most of the academic and laboratory positions in the U.S. So ITAMP graduates were doing very well. Clearly a big success. On the other hand, the graduate program did appear to some of the reviewers to be not quite as successful, and there was a decision made at some point to terminate that part of the program. There were also challenges to the visitor program. I think, talked to Kate and other people, ITAMP, I think, found it more and more difficult to attract really outstanding long-term visitors, particularly U.S. scientists, simply because more and more families have dual careers, and it's difficult for two individuals to get to the same place at the same time. Families are less inclined than in the past to separate, especially those with teenagers who find it difficult to just leave. But ITAMP is adjusting to these changing demographics, and they figured out new ways to get around by shifting money here and there and coming up with new ideas. So we turn to the last phase not the last, that's a bad choice of words, between then and current situation. So Misha Logan, who's here now, I guess was an ITAMP postdoc originally, and he got appointed as an assistant professor of physics at Harvard. And his expertise in quantum optics and other aspects of cold atom physics and quantum information clearly made him an extremely attractive candidate to the department, and his outstanding research enabled him to rise quickly and to a full professorship, I guess, at this point. Is that right? Yeah. And to enlarge his scientific repertoire to include experiment as well as theory. And then a few years ago, Misha was asked and agreed to become co-director of ITAMP with Kate. And right now, the ITAMP, I think, continues to be an important element in theoretical atomic and molecular physics. In the U.S., it's a model for other countries. It's almost 20 years since ITAMP was founded. Many people in this room, many people, including people in this room, were involved in laying out the rationale for the creation of the Institute. Others, such as Dick Pratt and Jerry Crawley, worked hard to get the NSF to recognize the importance of establishing a resource such as ITAMP and fighting for the money to do it, and in dealing with the attendant bureaucratic issues that we heard about that could have killed the idea at some point. Others, such as myself, have played a role in stewarding ITAMP, as well as being productively involved in workshops here from a scientific point of view. But I would just want to conclude by saying, without the vision and dedication of Alec Dalgarno, who persisted under less than ideal circumstances, none of this would have happened, and we wouldn't be up here saying a word right now. So happy birthday, Alex. And as I once heard in an old rock and roll song, I wasn't going to say this, but keep on chuglin'. Keep on chuglin'. I don't have any idea what the word means. I think it just means keep on moving.